All right, well, we are going to dive into our briefing today. My name's Anthony Shop. I am the chairman of the National Digital Roundtable. My day job is I'm the chief strategy officer at Social Driver, and we're so excited to welcome you to our briefing today. We have two of the brightest minds who I know in the digital world in the DC area, and basically across the country. We have Patrick Kane, who's the head of digital at the British Embassy, Washington. We have Kevin Coroneos, who's the director of digital advocacy strategy for the Investment Company Institute. And both of them are expert social media and digital heavy hitters that we all go to for advice. They're both advisory board members for the National Digital Roundtable, and they have been paying very close attention to Threads. They've been spending time on the platform, they've been doing research, and so we are going to ask them the questions that are on all of our minds today, and I encourage you to submit your own questions so that we can make sure we get through. But we want to know if Meta has broken new ground with the launch of Threads. They call it a cutting-edge platform designed to transform the way we connect, communicate, and share information. The media have called it a Twitter killer, and we're going to ask you in a poll to see how many of you think that that's right in a few minutes. So let's just dive in. Kevin Coroneos, tell us, what do we all need to know about Threads? Give us the basics.
All right, well, as Anthony said, this is like the hot topic right now in social media. It is #1 in the App Store of both Apple and Google Play, which is absolutely wild considering it just launched it around like 7 p.m. on Wednesday night. And already it's up to 70 million users. To put this in context, it took ChatGPT 2 months to get up to 100 million users. So already Threads is just skyrocketing in terms of user base. And part of the reason that may be is because this is actually tied to your Instagram account. So basically, there are over 2 billion people with Instagram across the world, and they're now able to just easily create a Threads account. And you're actually able to automatically follow anyone you're following on Instagram. So, unlike the platforms that are starting from scratch, like the Mastodons or the Blue Skies, you're able to quickly transition and build your audience base already, rather than having to go through individually and find new friends to follow. So just some of the other basics, 500 character posts versus the 280 characters on Twitter. So you can share up to 5-minute long videos, you can share GIFs, photos, links, but there are no hashtags, there's no trending section, there's no trending topics, lists, anything like that. And engagements are basically the same as they are on Twitter in terms of likes, replies, and reposts, and you can quote repost as well, quote thread, if you will. And there are no analytics and no desktop app right now. So there's no third-party management at all. You're working right through your phone on Threads. And you can't switch between accounts right now. So if you have a personal Threads and potentially one for work already, you can't easily switch between the two. But it's an exciting time to work on this platform and all figure it out together.
Kevin, you mentioned all the features that it doesn't have. It sort of feels like a simpler time, doesn't it? It reminds me of turning on, the nostalgia of turning on an old Seinfeld episode or something. It's like we go back to when things are just so simple and clean. What do you like about Threads? Is that an appeal for you?
Yeah, I'm still waiting for them to roll out a top 8 friends and profile songs, but I'll say it does feel simpler that just going on the app for the first time, it just seemed like everyone was having fun. Like people were actually there to be social and not to argue. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how many people immediately jumped on the platform, but it seemed like it was all digital strategists and comms professionals just trying to figure out what we're doing on this thing. But I agree, it felt like a simpler time of, just conversation rather than, all the drama that can come with social media.
So I'm wondering, obviously we have 70 million users, as you mentioned, across a large geography, but at the same time, Kevin and Patrick, you're both in DC. You're kind of connected to the Beltway. Patrick, what do you think Threads' impact on DC will be? Tell us kind of the landscape here from your point of view as the head of digital at the British Embassy.
Yeah, really good question. I think we're going to see a really interesting sort of calculation from a lot of folks, especially in the comms teams around the Beltway. I think what we've seen previously is that Instagram tends to be largely personal. People go there to see, what representatives had for lunch or what they're doing, things that are visually compelling. I think Twitter tends to be a lot more professional. And I think that we're going to see a really interesting blend of the two on Threads, because I think you're taking these followings from Instagram that tend to be a lot of your friends, your family, things like that, blending with this sort of style of Twitter. I think the big sort of, indicator for us will be if we start seeing folks from the news media moving on to Threads, as we've seen quite a bit. One of my first threads that I saw was from Pupville, the Beltway publication in DC here. I think that we also may see some folks who are more in the Instagram influencer world, see them starting to move into more text-based posts, which they haven't really had the platform to do before. I think we are in the wild, wild west of social media right now, and I'm really, really excited to see how that plays out and how that will weave into social media strategies across the board for companies and institutions.
So a big question on everyone's mind, and even, seeing this in the Q&A that's coming in, and do submit your questions if you haven't already, we're getting some great ones, is Threads a Twitter killer? So we're going to launch a really quick poll, and we're just going to take a few seconds for everyone to answer this, and then you're going to hear what our experts think. But do you think Threads is a Twitter killer? Wow, we have almost 100 answers already. Thank you for being an engaged group at noon on a Friday. We'll just wait a couple seconds here before we close this. And related to that, someone said, well, if it is a Twitter killer, what's going to happen with DC-based decision makers like lawmakers and the White House and others? Is this going to be a necessary tactic for them? So let's layer that into our answers here. Okay, we are going to close the poll, and our results, well, we are pretty evenly split as a group. 38% say yes, watch out Elon, 24% say no, and 38% says who knows. So if we split that down the middle, I think we're leaning a little more toward yes, watch out Elon. Kevin, why don't you go first? What do you think?
I think it has the potential to be a Twitter killer. And I think it's going to come down to when we see advertising on the platform. I mean, we've seen such a drastic drop in advertising revenue for Twitter already. Once you're able to advertise on Threads, and keep in mind, this is a meta platform. So you're advertising through that backend you're already familiar with. I think once we see that ad revenue, I think that's really going to confirm or deny its potential to be a Twitter killer. But just based on how things are trending in terms of the user base, I think it really has the potential to be a Twitter killer.
What do you think, Patrick?
Look, I'll say the numbers are in Threads' favor, right? So I did some quick math. I may be wrong on this, but let's say there are 2.3 billion monthly active users on Instagram. There are 450 million active users on Twitter. There's only 19% of Instagram's base that needs to pick up Threads in order to overtake in terms of numbers. However, I think that Twitter is going to put up a really strong fight. I think, over the weekend, we saw Elon took down or put in place, I should say, limits on how many tweets you can see, and then quickly remove that because they realized this is not actually, going to work in the way that we wanted to push people towards subscription. I think that Twitter is really reactive. They are fast. I would not be surprised if Twitter takes a page out of Meta's playbook and starts using some of the other features from other platforms that are working really, really well. We've already seen them do it with their scrolling videos in TikTok style. And I think that we're going to continue to see Twitter investing in things like that.
Sorry, Anthony, I was going to say, I think you are seeing that Twitter is actually a little rattled, though, too, Patrick, to your point. They did go back on that decision. But now you're also seeing Elon, if you go in his replies on his page right now, is just replying to anything that's attacking threads, from privacy issues, from just being such a similar platform to Twitter. I mean, he's going the PR route right now too, and just trying to take down threads from a couple different angles. I mean, I saw him and Jack Dorsey ganging up on threads together, which is the enemy of my enemy is my friend to a T.
And they sued him. They're going to sue them. So that's going to be another thing for us to watch. But those things take a long time. We had a great question come in about Twitter and threads. So I want to pull that up. Do we think that this hype is just a honeymoon phase, or will the same challenges facing Twitter eventually find their way to threads? Thank you, Tyler Simpson, for that question. What are some of the challenges? Because I know you both were at the Roundtable event we had at the British Embassy for National Digital Roundtable about the future of Twitter, and you both heard and expressed concerns about the Twitter platform. Will those same concerns address? Will threads have to deal with those, or are those concerns that are unique to Twitter? Quick take on that.
Great question. I'll jump in quickly. I think that Meta already has the infrastructure to do a lot of the content moderation that Twitter stripped away under new leadership. So I think in that sense, it is almost a safer bet to be on threads and using this platform that's established, that already has these legal teams, these content moderation teams in place. So I think we won't see a lot of that. I think something that Kevin brought up is the advertising potential. I think that is sort of the make or break for threads. Do they have the ability to monetize this in the way that Twitter can? And if so, that's all folded into the Meta space. As someone who manages social media accounts, I would love for all of my advertising dollars to be going exactly the same place and just feed it from there. I'll stop there. I have so many more thoughts.
Well, and we had somebody ask the question about advertising, so I think it's worth clarifying here. No, you cannot currently advertise on threads, but they've made it very clear this is going to happen in the future. I mean, this is how these companies, generate revenue. I mean, you got to stay in business, and they want to get user adoption, get the platform right. The fact that there is already an advertising backbone here. Kevin, can you talk about that? Because you manage advertising, and what is it like to have to manage all these separate platforms, and what would it do for you in your role to be able to integrate that into one? So Bailey, thank you for that question.
Yeah, so I'll say for those of you who are managing any ad campaigns on Facebook, on Instagram, any of those Meta platforms, what you're able to do is you're just in the background of ads manager, and you're able to change the format of specific ads, of campaigns, and divvy up the budget, where you want to aim it. So, for me, if I'm saying, oh, I would like, these types of ads, video ads on Instagram, I can do that. While maybe that same time I want that same messaging in just a graphic or a link on Facebook. Now I'll be able to have more text-based, link-based, anything on threads as well in the future once they roll that out. And for me, being able to optimize my budget for the platforms it's performing best on will be huge in terms of just content performance, because we'll be able to see, what's working best for our audience in order to drive that messaging home or achieve our goals of link clicks, engagements, you name it.
Love it. We have some great questions coming in about the EU and Europe. Patrick, you spend a lot of time focusing on the other side of the pond. Tell us a little bit about what's going on, because I don't know if everybody knows about if you can even use threads in the EU. What say you?
Great question. So what we know right now is Threads has limited global reach because the EU is still reviewing data privacy concerns. So the Threads app has actually not rolled out to any EU member countries yet, and it is still on pause. So we, as the United Kingdom, obviously are no longer part of the EU. So folks in the US and the UK have been able to download the Threads app so far, but people in France and in Germany have not yet been able to experience this app. there are, Meta has gone through this quite a few times with privacy concerns. Look, the bottom line is we give social media companies so much of our data. That is across the board. And I think there are real concerns about what are these companies doing with it and how are they going to use it. And I think that remains to be seen from Meta's side. I think there's a real opportunity for Meta to jump ahead of this and say, hey, here's how we are going to protect your data in a way that will make you comfortable using our platform. And I imagine it won't be very different from how they already manage data on Facebook and on Instagram and even on WhatsApp.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit in a minute about the Fediverse and why maybe that is being introduced, because it can address some of those EU regulatory concerns. Our audience has grown. If you're just joining us, I'm Anthony Shop, chairman of the National Digital Roundtable, also with Social Driver. We have two great advisory board members and experts with us today. Patrick Kane, head of digital at the British Embassy, Washington. Kevin Coroneos, director of digital advocacy strategy at ICI. And we're talking about threads. I want to switch gears a little bit. Kevin, some folks have been asking questions about this. You can't delete your Threads account without deleting your Instagram account. And if you don't have an Instagram account, can you even create a Threads account? What do we need to know?
Yes, so these things are fully intertwined right now. So to the people asking, your company, your principal does not have an Instagram account, but would like a Threads account, you have to create an Instagram account in order to create that Threads account. And yeah, right now, the platforms are so intertwined that you're not able to delete your Threads account without fully deleting your Instagram. So, there is a bit of an inherent risk from a content management standpoint right there, because if, you found success on Instagram and go ahead and create your Threads account and determine that that's no longer part of your content strategy anymore, well, it's still going to be in the universe for right now because you can't get rid of it. They're intertwined to the point right now where I've been getting notifications on Instagram, but it's actually someone just following me on Threads. And I got a Threads notification today that my wife had mentioned me in some fun post, but for some reason it was on Instagram, but it popped up in Threads. So I think there's still a couple things that are working out, but I envision in the future these are going to be a little more separate. But yeah, for the time being, these are fully intertwined platforms.
And it's really, look, this is probably the first time a brand new product has launched and had 70 million beta users at the same time, right? So this is going to evolve quickly, and a lot of these things are going to be worked out. We've already seen some posts from leaders at Meta on this. Patrick, you wear two hats, as many people who are tuned in with us today do, right? You're a personal user of platforms like this one, but you also are a manager of platforms for brands such as the British Embassy. Tell us a little bit about what that means, because we have some great questions coming in saying, well, wait a minute, how do I manage this if I'm a manager? And do I have to log out? And can I use a platform? So what are you seeing? What are your concerns? What do we need to know?
Great question. So I work with an amazing network of communicators across the US and then around the globe, all working for British embassies and consulates and high commissions. I had a call this morning with a group of folks from the US network, and our main concern as social media managers is, oh my gosh, do we have another beast to feed? And how do we differentiate this from the accounts that we already have? I think that's sort of the big question right now is this just a copy paste from Twitter situation? What are we giving people that is different? And I think there's just a lot of questions in that sense. I am someone who has a personal Twitter account that is, linked to my work, but I don't end up tweeting personally very often because I spend all day doing it on UK and USA and whatnot. And I think a lot of people have sort of slipped away from this in that sense. And so I'm really curious to see if we'll get a little bit more of the personal on Threads. Is it going to be, in the way that people, influencers have been doing the community newsletters in your DMs lately? I wonder if we'll see a bit more of that style thing on Threads. Is it going to be, hey, I'm going to be in the park, come see me, posted on Threads, as opposed to, my long-winded thoughts about the latest Atlantic Declaration or whatever has just come out?
We had a question about, how can Threads compete with the intense growth of TikTok? And Kevin, you shared with me a little bit earlier. I'd love for you to talk about the challenge of TikTok for an organization like yours compared to a platform like Threads.
Yeah, and I think it's particularly interesting because let's take my organization, the Investment Company Institute, for example. We're a trade association that represents mutual funds, ETFs, other regulated funds in that space. We don't have the most visually appealing graphics. We don't have the most, exciting things for TikTok, for Instagram, platforms like that. But what we do have is really good research, really good releases, blogs, things like that, where our audience that tends to be wonkier, that tends to want those longer reports, things like that, that's their priority. And a platform like Threads does, work for us potentially, and like our content goals. However, the interesting thing and the conversations we're having at work right now is, do we need to figure out an Instagram strategy? Because if people are, looking at our Threads account, are they also expecting engagement on Instagram? So it's a very interesting balance for us to figure out. We're never going to be on a platform like a TikTok. We'll take advantage of influencers as needed, but for us personally, it's hard for us to generate that content. But right now, the challenge is figuring out, will our audience go to Threads, and if they are, do they also expect content on Instagram, and how do we evolve and change that? And we've got a few ideas and a few things cooking up right now, so we'll see how it rolls out later this year. But to the people also asking questions of like, is it a good idea for my brand to jump on there now? I mean, again, we don't have an Instagram, but you bet I just went in and locked in the usernames I wanted for both Instagram and Threads as, we're planning our strategies for the future. That doesn't mean, we're immediately jumping in and starting to take our Twitter strategy and throw it on Threads. We're taking our time. We're seeing what the environment looks like, and we're planning out how to better engage on these platforms.
I also think there's a really interesting distinction. I think we lump TikTok into social media writ large, but I actually think TikTok is way more similar to YouTube or Netflix. It is content consumption as opposed to the actual social side of social media. I think that Threads gives us that really social side. I think it is our audiences that we've built on our Instagram pages and that we want to talk to, as opposed to something like TikTok or even Twitter, where it's a little bit more of a megaphone.
There was a really important announcement around the launch of this, that Threads will be part of the Fediverse. I don't know if everybody knows what the Fediverse is. Kevin, give us a quick primer.
Okay, we're going to get a little technical. So the Fediverse is basically an interconnected system of separate servers, so that communicate with one another and for like a social media platform or something. So this has a couple different advantages. So number one, from a data privacy perspective, your personal data is now spread out across a bunch of different servers. So, it's actually harder for people to access your private data. So this is, one thing they're doing to try to work with the EU on any privacy regulations there. But the Fediverse also is envisioned to allow different social media platforms to communicate with one another. So think of, you're on Instagram, you would be able to interact with a Mastodon post or something like that. That's eventually the goal here, is a more interconnected social world where you can interact with different platforms through a single platform, essentially. As an analogy here, think of like email. I have an Outlook account, I have a Gmail account. I can communicate between those two things, but right now I can't DM someone on Instagram from my GChat account. But in the future, this interconnected world, I can maybe be able to do that. We'll see how it turns out, but this is what they're envisioning up right now.
Yeah. So major shift in how social media might work for all of us as part of this announcement. Maybe that'll even push Twitter to have to become part of the Fediverse. Now, I want to say, I remember, I don't know, Google Plus, when everybody thought that that was going to be the next big thing. I remember Clubhouse. Patrick, how do we know Threads isn't going to be the next flash in the pan like those were?
Look, I can't say it 100%, but they have the backing of Meta. I mean, Meta is the largest social media company in terms of they own Facebook, they have Instagram, they have WhatsApp, and now they have Threads. I think that they are hitting across the board. They have the resourcing to keep it active. And I think most importantly, they have such an engaged user base. I think that is the key difference. I mean, if you go to Twitter right now and try to create a new account, you start at 0. And I think the smartest thing that Threads did was just copy paste your followers from Instagram right into your Threads account. Even if you want to go back later and remove, grandma doesn't need to be seeing what I'm doing here. My mom is absolutely not going to be following me on Threads. But you have that user base already. And especially for government accounts like myself, corporations, for companies, I think that is a huge value add for them and a reason for them to just migrate directly.
Absolutely. We have a couple questions about the algorithm. I think it was you, Kevin, who sent me, I think it was a Threads post from a leader at Meta. Tell us a little bit about that. What's
Yeah,
the algorithm?
right now there kind of is none. It's kind of just a random feed of different people popping up. In my Threads post earlier today on this panel, I literally said like, hello, random Threads users, because there's kind of no algorithm. However, they are working to create a chronological followers only feed. That's something that they're developing right now, apparently. But yeah, so my guess is that we'll see this in the future. We'll see how long it takes. I think someone mentioned it earlier in the questions, but yeah, I do think that Threads took advantage of Elon Musk's announcement of the tweet limit. And I think with Reddit's API issues, I think Threads capitalized on this and jumped in. And I mean, it really paid off with how many users joined immediately. But there's some things that they're still working out. So I think the algorithm is definitely everyone's priority right now, because I would also like to know how it works.
Yeah. Last question to wrap, because we're right at time. Tell us who we should follow on Threads. Patrick?
Great question. We've seen a lot of international organizations. Hat tip to Andres for posting this, another member of the National Digital Roundtable Advisory Board. So we've seen United Nations is on there, UNICEF is on there. We have not yet seen President Zelensky, but we've seen the governments of Ukraine have accounts up there. World Economic Forum and the Red Cross are already up there. We've also seen a huge number of members of Congress on there. So we've seen, House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, Reps Nancy Pelosi. We've seen a lot of big hitters from Capitol Hill on there. And I will be really curious to see how they are going to capitalize on this. And I'm sure their digital comms teams are probably having these same conversations that we are right now.
Kevin, last word. Who should we follow?
Yeah, I would say follow news organizations. We need to see what they're doing. We need to see how they're transitioning to Threads, if they're using it just like Twitter, if they're using it like Instagram. I think they're a really good base to see, what this conversation's turning into. I know for ICI in particular, the Financial Times is one of our more important outlets, and they're already very active on Threads. So I have my CEO asking questions, but I'm also keeping a pulse on them to see how they're engaging. And then, of course, follow us as we navigate this platform together. My handle is just my name, so easy to find.
Follow Patrick Kane. Follow Kevin Coroneos. Thank you both for being with us today for this National Digital Roundtable briefing. I'm Anthony Schopp. We are going to have more of these to keep you updated, because there are so many questions we didn't have a chance to answer, and so many just unanswered questions on this topic in general. So everyone have a great weekend and have fun on Threads. Bye now.